I'm an old school barber. For over 20 years, behind this worn out chair and sharp blade, I've heard just about every kind of life story you can imagine. Silent CEOs lost in thought, fathers trying to find their way back, and men who thought they'd lost it all until a woman walked into their life carrying something they'd forgotten how to hold on to: hope. I don't make these stories up. They come from real people who've sat in my chair, leaving behind pieces of their life with every shave. And with their permission, today I'm telling one of those stories. It's not mine, but it's cut deep into my memory like a fresh blade. The names have been changed, but the emotions, every word, they're real. The man's name was Damian Sterling, a reclusive billionaire trapped between a haunting past and the cold walls of a glass empire. And the woman was Maya Reed, a single mother living in her car in the dead of a brutal Chicago winter, just hoping her child could be warm for one single day. That night, two worlds that were never meant to meet did, not through money, not through tragedy, but through a quiet, desperate whisper outside the city's most luxurious restaurant. "Sir, could I please have your leftovers?" And what happened next, you wouldn't believe. So sit back, listen closely, and feel every word. Inside an old car, the only light comes from the dim orange glow of street lamps filtering through thick snow caked on the windows. Chicago is no longer a city. It's a white tomb, swallowed by a century's worst blizzard. This car isn't a shelter. It's a metal coffin, and the air inside is running thin. Not air, but hope. Maya Reed clutches her 8-month-old son, Leo, to her chest. His tiny body trembles, not from the cold, but from another struggle, an invisible battle raging in his lungs. Leo's breaths are no longer the soft sighs of a sleeping child. They're a wheezing, frail, halting sound, a mournful melody signaling life slipping away. Each inhale is a heroic effort, each exhale weaker than the last. Panic surges in Maya's chest, colder and sharper than the storm outside. She's called 911. The voice on the other end, a woman's, emotionless and mechanical, crushed her last spark of hope with words as icy as the wind. "Ma'am, the entire city's in a state of emergency. All roads are blocked. We can't send an ambulance. Can't send." Those words echo in Maya's mind, a death sentence for her innocent son. She's failed. The world has failed her. Her family abandoned her. And now even the most basic help, an ambulance, is out of reach. She stares out the window at the fury of the white snow, feeling each flake fall like an accusation, each gust of wind mocking her helplessness. There's only one option left. A phone number she never thought she'd dare to call. A number from another world, a world of glass and steel, of tailored suits and billion-dollar decisions. A world that brushed her life briefly like a strange dream. Her trembling hand dials the digits on her old phone. She doesn't expect an answer. Why would someone like him care? But then, a voice cuts through the storm's howl. It's not warm, not comforting. It's steely, commanding, and startlingly cold. "I'm listening." Maya sobs, her words breaking. Save my son. He can't breathe." There's no hesitation, no pointless questions. The man on the other end issues a command, a promise as solid as if he could order the blizzard itself to stop. "Send me your location." "I'm coming." Who is this man? And why would a reclusive billionaire, a man thought to have a heart long dead, drive into the heart of a deadly blizzard to save a homeless woman and her child? To understand the miracle about to unfold on Chicago's coldest night, to witness how a broken heart can heal, and to discover that family is sometimes forged not by blood, but by a promise in a storm, we must go back in time. 2 weeks before the blizzard, Damian Sterling's world held no howling winds, only silence. Not a peaceful silence, but a heavy, orderly one, bought with billions and encased in floor-to-ceiling glass. His penthouse claimed the top floor of a gleaming Chicago tower, a gilded cage suspended above the city. From here, he could see everything. The bustling streets like rivers of light, Millennium Park sprawling like a green tapestry, and the vast, still expanse of Lake Michigan, as calm as his own soul. Everything in the apartment was flawless. Minimalist Italian furniture, contemporary art worth fortunes, and a climate system keeping the air at a constant 72 degrees Fahrenheit, no matter the scorching summer or freezing winter outside. But Damian felt no warmth. He lived like a ghost in his own empire. Each day mirrored the last, a string of soulless routines designed to fill time and block out memories. Yet they always found a way to creep in. especially when he glanced at the single photo on his ebony desk. It showed a woman with honey blonde hair, laughing brightly, and a 6-year-old girl with eyes just like his, perched on her mother's shoulders. That was his world before the crash, before the screech of metal, the shatter of glass like diamonds, and the silence that became his only companion. He was behind the wheel, and that truth was a prison stronger than any glass walls. He didn't dine out because he was hungry. He went because it was Friday night, and Friday nights meant the pinnacle. It was part of the routine, a meaningless duty. The pinnacle was the height of luxury, a place where the air itself seemed thick with wealth. Soft piano notes, the faint clink of crystal glasses, and the murmurs of powerful conversations formed a symphony of affluence. Damien took his usual table in the corner by the window, ordering a glass of red wine he wouldn't finish. He stared outside, seeing nothing, until a small commotion at the entrance caught his attention. That's when he saw her, Maya Reed, though he didn't know her name then. He saw only a young, gaunt woman clutching a baby in a threadbare coat, trying to find shelter under the restaurant's awning from a sudden icy rain. Then he saw the manager, a man with a fake smile and a disdainful bow, approaching her. He said something, words too quiet for Damien to hear, but the attitude was unmistakable. It was dismissal. Damien was ready to look away, to return to his familiar apathy, but something held him back. It was the way the woman stood tall. Despite her soaked clothes and pale, cold face, her spine was ramrod straight. Her eyes, when she looked up at the manager, held no fear or pleading, only exhaustion and a defiance bordering on challenge. She wasn't shielding herself. She was using her frail body to protect the tiny life in her arms. In that moment, Damien didn't see a stranger. He saw protection, unconditional love, something he'd had and lost. A strange emotion, something like anger stirred in his empty chest. The manager raised a hand, about to shoo her away. That's when Damien acted. He didn't stand or shout. He simply raised his head, his icy gaze locking onto the manager. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of billions and decisions that could reshape industries. Leave her alone. The manager froze, his smug smile stiffening. He turned, realized who had spoken, and his face paled. Damien didn't need to say more. With a slight tilt of his chin toward the woman, he issued a command laced with authority. Get her a table. Put it on my tab. Then he turned to Maya, who looked at him with surprise and wariness. His voice softened, the coldness giving way to weariness. Please, come inside. Silence engulfed the entrance of the pinnacle, a tense, heavy silence louder than any shout. The manager, smug just a second ago, now stood frozen, his face shifting from pale to flushed. Damien Sterling's words weren't a request, they were a command, and in this world, his commands were absolute. With a stiff nod, a forced smile awkwardly plastered back on, the manager turned to Maya. His voice was quieter now, but the disdain still seeped through. Follow me, please. Other diners began to whisper. Curious, judgmental stares mixed with fleeting, shallow pity zeroed in on Maya. She felt them like hundreds of needles pricking her skin. She wanted to turn and flee, to escape this opulent, artificial place where kindness was dispensed like a favor and poverty treated like a contagious disease. But then Leo stirred in her arms, a faint whimper escaping his tiny lips. The cold had seeped deep into him. The restaurant's warmth, even if temporary, was something she couldn't deny her son. Taking a deep breath to summon her courage, she nodded and followed the manager, her back straight, though each step felt like walking on hot coals. They were led to a small table tucked in a corner, a subtle insult from the manager, but Maya didn't care. It was quiet, and most importantly, it was warm. Damien didn't join her. He remained at his table, a king surveying his realm from afar. He signaled a waiter, murmured a few words, and minutes later, steaming dishes arrived at Maya's table. Not elaborate fare, but comforting food. A bowl of thick cream of chicken soup, slices of buttered toast, and a serving of tender roast chicken with mashed potatoes, food that soothed. The aroma made Maya's stomach twist with hunger, but she ignored it. She settled Leo upright in her lap, pulling a worn but spotless plastic spoon from her canvas bag. Her world shrank to just her and her baby boy. She scooped a small spoonful of soup, carefully blew it cool, and gently brought it to Leo's mouth. After a moment's hesitation, he accepted it. Then a tiny sound broke through the restaurant's elegance, A soft, joyful ah from a child tasting something warm and delicious for the first time in ages. Leo's eyes lit up. His little hand patted his mother's chest, a gesture of pure contentment. Across the room, Damian Sterling heard that sound, and his heart, which he thought had turned to stone, clenched painfully. That noise, that smile, echoed a lost world. He closed his eyes, and the image of his wife Lillian, patiently feeding their young daughter spoonfuls of porridge, flashed vividly. He'd forgotten that feeling, the simple, sacred tenderness of a mother's love. He'd buried it with every other memory on that fateful day. He'd thought his kindness was a fleeting impulse, a passing pity. But now he realized it was deeper. He wasn't just seeing a mother feed her child. He was witnessing a ritual, an act of the purest love, and it made his own existence feel utterly hollow and meaningless. Maya continued feeding Leo with infinite patience, oblivious to her surroundings. Only after he was full, his eyes drooping with sleep, did she eat her own portion. But she took just a few bites, enough to quiet her hunger. Then she did something that stunned Damian. She carefully asked the waiter for some foil and meticulously wrapped the leftover chicken and potatoes. She wasn't saving scraps. She was securing tomorrow's safety. She was protecting her son's future, one small piece at a time. When she was done, she stood cradling Leo. She didn't approach Damian's table. She only turned toward him, and for a moment, their eyes met. She gave a slight nod. It wasn't a thank you. It was an acknowledgement. A silent recognition between two people that, on a frigid Chicago night, something unexpected had happened. Then she turned and disappeared through the restaurant's heavy door, back into the rain and darkness. Damian remained, his glass of red wine untouched. The silence of his penthouse now seemed more terrifying than ever. He couldn't go back there. Not tonight. For reasons he couldn't name, a powerful urge, the first emotion besides pain in 5 years, stirred within him. He left a $100 bill on the table, stood, and walked out of the restaurant. He stepped into the rain, not to return home, but to follow the fading figures of the woman and child vanishing into the dark alley ahead. He didn't know what he was searching for, only that he couldn't let their story end here. Chicago's rain wasn't just cold, it had purpose. It washed away the glossy veneer of glittering boulevards, exposing the city's ribs. A maze of alleys where shattered neon lights reflected in filthy puddles and overflowing dumpsters told the stories of millions. Damian Sterling, a man who could jet from New York to Tokyo on a private plane, now walked a cracked sidewalk, keeping a safe distance from the woman he followed. His expensive cashmere coat quickly soaked through, but he didn't care. For the first time in years, he was doing something unscheduled. He was acting on instinct. Maya didn't wander. She moved with clear intent, turning down dark paths with a heartbreaking familiarity. She clutched Leo to her chest, her body a frail shield against the world. Damian trailed behind, a shadow in a tailored suit, utterly out of place. He wondered what he was doing. This wasn't pity, the cheap emotion people like him used to soothe their consciences. This was curiosity, an almost compulsive need to know where the story of this woman, with dignity in her eyes and sorrow in her stride, would end tonight. The final alley opened to a dilapidated parking lot, forgotten behind an old brick building. It was a graveyard of abandoned dreams. A few rusted cars sat like metal skeletons, but one vehicle stood out. A battered, dented sedan, its sea green paint faded. It was different because its windows were fogged with breath, a sign of life inside. Damian stopped in the shadows, and a brutal truth hit him harder than the icy wind. That wasn't a car. It was a home. He watched as Maya approached it without hesitation. She deftly opened the back door, carefully settling Leo inside, wrapping him in a worn blanket. Then she climbed in, slamming the door shut, severing contact with the outside world. For a moment, Damian caught a faint melody, nearly drowned by the rain, a lullaby. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Love, warm and resilient, existed inside that frigid metal box. It was truer, stronger than anything in his empty penthouse. He couldn't just walk away. He couldn't return to his life as if he hadn't seen this. He stepped from the shadows, his shoes crunching on wet gravel. The lullaby stopped instantly. The car door flew open. Maya emerged, and this time her eyes held not exhaustion but a razor-sharp wariness. "Why are you following me?" she asked, her voice low but steady, ready to fight. Damien raised both hands, a gesture of peace. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice deep and sincere. "I didn't mean to scare you. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Maya gave a bitter laugh. "We're living in a car. You think we're okay? I saw how you fed your son," Damien continued, ignoring her sarcasm. "I've never seen anyone so careful." Maya's defenses softened slightly at the unexpected words. "He's all I have. His name's Leo." "Leo," Damien repeated, the name lingering in the air. He seemed to really like those mashed potatoes. A fleeting smile crossed Maya's lips, the first he'd seen. "Yeah, he does. My son did too," Damien blurted, and as the words escaped, an old wound throbbed. Silence fell between them, but this time it wasn't tense. It was filled with an unspoken understanding. Damien broke it first. He did the only thing he knew when faced with a problem. He offered money. "I can help. A hotel, food, anything you need." But Maya shook her head, her gaze resolute again. "I don't need your money. I'm not a charity case." Her response threw Damien off balance. His entire life, money had been the answer to everything. For the first time, his solution was rejected. "Then, what do you want?" he asked, a genuine question born of confusion. Maya glanced into the car, where Leo slept soundly, then looked back, meeting Damien's eyes. Her answer wasn't a demand. It was a prayer, a plea so simple it shattered his heart. "Just one day," she said softly, almost a whisper. "One day where he's warm, fed, safe. One day where he doesn't hear rain on a metal roof. That's all I want." Her words hung in the freezing air between them. A request so small for a man with everything, yet it was her entire world. Damien stood motionless. He could buy this building, this whole block, but a day of safety? That couldn't be bought with a check. It required something else, something he thought he'd lost forever. And in that moment, he knew his life, like hers, would never be the same. Maya's words weren't a shout, but to Damien Sterling, they thundered louder than any storm. They pierced his costly coat, cut through years of callousness and indifference, and struck the place he thought held nothing but a cold void. He, a man who could buy thousands of days, thousands of weeks, yet couldn't find a single moment of true peace for himself. He had safety behind bulletproof glass and a security team, but lived in fear of memories. He had warmth from a smart heating system, but always felt frozen inside. He could eat anything in the world, but everything tasted bland. Her request didn't just expose her poverty, it laid bare his emptiness. He didn't know how long he stood in the rain. Finally, he gave a faint nod, barely perceptible. "I understand," he said, then turned and walked away, leaving Maya alone with her surprise and uncertainty. Driving back to his penthouse, Chicago's lights, once symbols of his power, looked different. Each glowing window was no longer a building but a home, a family, a small, warm world he didn't belong to. Maya's words hadn't given him a problem to solve. They'd given him a mirror, and the reflection was a failed man. The next morning, Damien woke but broke his routine. He didn't read financial reports. He didn't call partners in London or Tokyo. Instead, he walked into his vast kitchen where his private chef prepared meals he rarely touched. He did something he hadn't in years. He brewed a pot of coffee himself. As it percolated, he issued orders. He didn't call a delivery service. He contacted his only trusted assistant, an older man who'd worked for him before he became a legend. His instructions were brief, precise, and unusual. Buy the best thermos, a box of premium infant formula, a few packs of the softest diapers, a thick wool blanket, and a prepaid phone. The simplest kind, no registration needed. His actions weren't impulsive kindness. They were calculated like a military strategy. He would respect her dignity. He wouldn't offer money. He would give her what she asked for, but on his terms. He would provide her a day of safety, then another and another, but he'd do it as a shadow. Before dawn, in the gray-blue hour when the city still slept, his assistant's unmarked car stopped at the alley's edge. The man silently placed a large bag near Maya's battered sedan containing the wool blanket, diapers, and formula. Beside it was the thermos, radiating warmth and the aroma of chicken soup Damien had ordered prepared. Finally, a fully charged prepaid phone in a waterproof bag. No note, no trace. Then he left. When Maya woke to Leo's stirring, she saw the bag. Her first reaction was fear. Who was here? What did they want? Her heart pounded as she cautiously opened it, but inside was nothing frightening, only warmth and wordless care. She touched the blanket, softer than anything she'd owned. She saw the formula, a luxury she'd only dreamed of. When she opened the thermos, the savory scent of soup brought a hot tear rolling down her cheek. This wasn't pity. Pity came with condescending glances. This was something else. A quiet help that asked for no gratitude. That day and the days after, the ritual continued. Sometimes a bag of fresh groceries, sometimes warm clothes for Leo. Maya never saw the deliverer, but their presence became a fragile thread of hope in her life. She began to fear a little less. She charged the strange phone, though she didn't know who to call. For the first time in months, she felt not entirely invisible. Meanwhile, weather reports warned of a forming low-pressure system, a storm that could become the storm of the century. Maya overheard it on a convenience store radio, but paid little mind. Her world had narrowed to the car and the mysterious gifts appearing each morning. She didn't know the real storm wasn't just snow and wind. It was coming, a final test of her courage and the redemption of a man she'd never truly met. And it would change everything. The blizzard didn't arrive like a guest. It struck. Chicago's sky turned from gray to lead, and then the snow began to fall. Not gentle, romantic flakes, but a white wall, a dense curtain of snow, whipped by winds howling like starving wolves. Within hours, the city that never sleeps was paralyzed, shrouded in the eerie silence of a world brought to a halt. For Maya, the old car, once a fragile symbol of freedom and her only shelter, had become a trap. It turned into a metal freezer. Thick snow quickly coated the windows, plunging her and Leo into a dim, claustrophobic world. She tried starting the engine to run the heater, but it coughed weakly a few times and died. The cold seeped through every crack, an invisible, merciless enemy. And it didn't attack alone. It targeted Leo's lungs. The boy's already frail breaths became a battle. The freezing air gripped his tiny chest, and a latent asthma attack flared viciously. Each inhale was a painful, rasping whistle. His face paled, his lips tinged blue. The panic Maya had suppressed for months erupted. This was no longer a fight against hunger or loneliness. It was a fight against time, against death itself. She grabbed the prepaid phone, her numb fingers fumbling to dial 911. The dispatcher's cold response was a knife to her hope. Roads are blocked. No one can get through. She was alone, utterly alone. But then she remembered. There was one other number in the contacts. The mysterious man, her unseen benefactor. With no other choice, she dialed. In his penthouse, Damian Sterling stood before a glass wall, watching the raging storm with an odd detachment. The blizzard's destructive force felt strangely familiar, mirroring the tempest in his soul. Then an unexpected sound broke through. Not his main phone, but the prepaid one on his desk, nearly forgotten. He picked it up. Maya's sobbing, desperate voice on the other end awakened the decisive man within him. The Wall Street wolf used to making split-second choices under crushing pressure. No hesitation, no fear, only action. Send me your location. I'm coming. Damian's journey through the ghostly city was a war. His luxury SUV, built to conquer any terrain, roared with effort against the deep snow and sideways gusts. But he didn't stop. The image of the woman with resolute eyes and the child gasping in the cold became his sole beacon. When he found Maya's car, he barely recognized it under the snow. He scooped up mother and son, wrapped them in his coat, placed them in his warm vehicle, and sped toward the city's best private hospital. The hospital was chaos, but the name Damian Sterling opened every door. Nurses and doctors rushed Leo to the emergency room. As Maya sat shivering in a hallway chair, trembling from cold and fear, a man in an expensive suit with neatly combed gray hair and a stern face strode toward them, trailed by hospital administrators. He looked at Damian first, then his gaze swept to Maya, freezing with disgust and anger. "Maya, what are you doing here?" Maya looked up, eyes brimming. "Dad, Leo, my son, he can't breathe." The man, Mr. Reed, hospital board chairman and Maya's father, didn't even glance toward the ER. His concern was elsewhere. "Who brought you here? You can't be here. There'll be a scandal." He turned to a nurse. "Take her to a waiting room. Handle this discreetly." It was the final betrayal. A father willing to sacrifice his grandson for appearances. But before the nurse could touch Maya, Damian stepped forward, placing himself between her and her father. He towered over Mr. Reed, his presence radiating absolute authority. "Your grandson," Damian said, his voice low and dangerous, "is in there, fighting for his life. And all you care about is a scandal?" Mr. Reed flinched. Who Who are you to meddle in my family's affairs? I'm the one who got them here, Damien shot back, his eyes like steel. And I'm the one who will make sure that boy gets the best care. Now, you either use your influence to save your grandson, or you stand there and I swear, when this blizzard clears, the storm I'll unleash on your life and career will just be starting. Under Damien Sterling's steel-cold threat, Mr. Reed's arrogance crumbled. He was a man of power, and thus recognized a greater force when faced with it. Damien's authority didn't stem solely from wealth. It came from an unyielding resolve, a readiness to burn everything to achieve his goal. Mr. Reed's face twitched. He swallowed hard, then turned to the stunned chief physician nearby, his voice now laced with feigned urgency. Doctor, what are you waiting for? Assemble the best team. Use the most advanced equipment. I want this child treated like he's the Prince of England. Understood? The order was given. Immediately, a medical team sprang into action. Leo was moved to the pediatric ICU, where top specialists began the fight to restore each of his breaths. The hospital corridor returned to silence, but the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The blizzard still raged outside, but in this sterile space, another storm had just subsided. Damien said nothing. He gently placed a hand on Maya's shoulder, guiding her to a row of chairs in a quiet waiting area. He disappeared briefly and returned with a warm hospital blanket and a steaming cup of tea. He didn't ask if she needed them. He simply placed them in her hands. It was a small gesture, but to Maya, it meant more than any words of comfort. A day of safety, she'd begged for that. And now, in the heart of her worst nightmare, she was being sheltered by this stranger. Hours crawled by like a slow-motion film. Finally, a nurse emerged, her face wearing a tired but relieved smile. The boy's out of danger, she announced. His fever's breaking and his breathing stabilized. He's a real little fighter. A breath Maya didn't realize she'd been holding rushed out. Her strength gave way. Her legs buckled, and she would have collapsed if Damien hadn't caught her. For the first time, she allowed herself to be vulnerable. She buried her face in his shoulder, her body shaking, not from cold, but from the release of hours, months of pent-up stress and fear. Damien, who hadn't held anyone in 5 years, stood steady as a rock, his arms shielding her awkwardly but firmly. The next morning, the blizzard had cleared. The sky was a cruel, clear blue. But another storm, fiercer and more venomous, was just beginning. It started with a blurry photo, snapped covertly by a greedy hospital staffer. The image showed Damien Sterling, the reclusive billionaire, supporting a young, unfamiliar woman, his face taut with tension. Within an hour, it hit the front page of a tabloid blog. Then it exploded. The internet didn't need truth, it needed a good story. And this was irresistible. Billionaire Damien Sterling and the mystery single mom, act of kindness or calculated trap. Sensational headlines sprouted like weeds. Forums and social media spread the story like wildfire. Maya's identity was swiftly exposed. Her past was dug up. Comments slithered across screens like venomous snakes. Just another gold digger. She obviously set him up. What kind of mother lets her kid nearly die in a car? Reporters hounded her family. And her father, in a desperate bid to save his reputation, issued cold statements hinting at Maya's wrong choices and rebellious lifestyle, painting her as a wayward daughter in the public's eyes. In the luxurious hotel room Damien had arranged, Maya sat on the bed, her phone trembling in her hands. Each word she read was a stab. They'd taken her life, her pain, her fight for survival, and turned it into a cheap drama for the world to judge. Tears streamed down her face. She had to leave. She had to disappear to shield Leo from this cruel world. When Damien walked in, she shot to her feet. "I have to go," she said, her voice frantic. "I can't stay here. I can't let my son grow up and someday read these lies and wonder if they're true." Damien looked at her, his gaze calm but resolute. He'd been a tabloid target before. He knew how this machine worked. He knew running wasn't an option. "They won't stop, Maya," he said softly. "If we run, they win. They'll get to write your story. They'll define who you are. It's time." He paused, locking eyes with her as a decision solidified. "It's time we wrote our own story." Damien Sterling's decision wasn't an empty promise. It was a campaign. That night, he summoned his media team. His demands were clear and non-negotiable. No pre-written press release. No chaotic press conference with 100 shouted questions. He wanted something else. An exclusive live national TV interview with the one journalist he respected. One camera, no studio audience, no script, just the truth. It was a high-stakes move. His team protested, arguing that such exposure could backfire, sparking an even worse media storm. But they didn't understand. Damien wasn't trying to manage damage. He was aiming to burn the forest down and plant a new tree from the ashes. The next night, America was glued to their screens. The setup was stark. Damien sat in an armchair facing a veteran journalist. Soft lighting in a quiet space focused on one thing, his words. Maya watched from the hotel room, her hands clenched, heart pounding. Her future, her son's future, hinged on what was about to unfold. The journalist opened with a simple question. Mr. Sterling, the world's talking about what happened. Can you tell us the story from your perspective? Damien didn't look at the journalist. He stared straight into the camera lens, as if meeting the eyes of every living room, bar, and kitchen watching. And he began, but not with Maya. He began with himself. 5 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago, his voice was steady but carried deep pain. I was behind the wheel in a car accident. It was raining. The road was slick, a moment of distraction, just one moment. He paused, swallowing hard. In that moment, I lost everything. My wife, Lillian, and my 6-year-old daughter, Clara. They died at the scene. The studio's silence was near absolute. This was a story the public had never heard. People see the buildings I've built, the companies I've bought, he continued. They think that's success. They're wrong. It was a tomb. A lavish, glittering tomb I built to bury myself. Because the truth is, part of me died with them that day. I existed, but I didn't live. I built a wall of money and silence around myself, not to keep the world out, but to trap the memories inside. He took a deep breath. And then, in the tomb I built for myself, a whisper broke through. A young woman stood in the rain, holding a child, asking for my leftovers. He recounted that night at the restaurant, not as charity, but as an awakening. The world saw her and called her poor. You call her a gold digger, an opportunist. But do you know what I saw? His gaze sharpened. I saw dignity. I saw a mother willing to do anything to protect her child. I saw love in its purest, fiercest form. A love I once had, once knew, and lost. When her son fell ill in the blizzard, I didn't act out of pity. I acted out of shame. Shame that I was living in a safe palace while a child fought to breathe in a freezing car. Shame that our society, with so much, could let a mother and child fall into such a place. He leaned forward, his voice cracking with restrained emotion. They say she trapped me, that she took something from me. He shook his head. She didn't take anything. She gave me something. She gave me a reason to feel again. She broke the wall I'd built. She reminded me that, even after the worst losses, the human heart can still care for another. He looked into the camera, tears now glistening in his eyes. So to those watching, to those judging, he said, his voice catching, I want to make this clear. I didn't save them. They saved me. The interview ended in silence. But outside, the digital world erupted. Public opinion flipped 180 degrees. Vicious criticisms gave way to confessions. Stories of loss, struggle, and motherhood. Maya and Leo trended. Compassion replaced judgment. In the hotel room, Maya sat motionless, tears streaming down her cheeks. These weren't tears of shame or fear. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and the first time in ages she felt seen. Damien Sterling hadn't just defended her honor, he'd given her back her story. When Damien Sterling returned to the hotel room that night, the air was thick with unspoken truths. The interview was over, but the emotions it stirred lingered. Maya sat on the sofa, baby Leo sleeping peacefully in a crib nearby. She looked up at him, her eyes red but free of panic. They were clear, filled with a gratitude so deep it nearly made him turn away. She didn't say much. Just 2 words escaped in a whisper. Thank you. Damien nodded faintly, exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. I told the truth, he replied. He shed his coat, loosened his tie. The armor of the powerful billionaire fell away. In that room, only 2 people remained, each bearing their own scars, having just survived a battle together. That night, they said no more. Words felt unnecessary. The other's quiet presence was enough. In the days that followed, the outside world moved on. Sensational headlines gave way to new stories, but for Damien and Maya, their world was just beginning. Damien knew they couldn't stay in a hotel forever. He arranged an apartment for them, not a lavish penthouse, but a cozy 2-bedroom unit flooded with sunlight in a quiet neighborhood. He personally oversaw its preparation. One room, painted pale blue, was for Leo, with a safe crib and plush toys. The kitchen was fully stocked. Everything was clean, fresh, and most importantly, private. He took them there, and when Maya stepped inside, she burst into tears. This time, they were tears of relief. For the first time since Leo's birth, she had a place to call home. A new routine, gentle and tentative, began to form. Damien visited daily. At first, he made excuses, checking if they needed anything, bringing groceries or a new toy for Leo. But soon, the pretenses faded. He came because he wanted to. He came to hear Leo's giggles when he saw him. He came to sit in the kitchen, sipping coffee Maya brewed, trading small talk about the weather or news. He, the man who once ran billion-dollar meetings, now fumbled learning to hold a bottle at the right angle. He, who could dissect complex financial charts, now tried deciphering whether Leo's cries meant hunger or sleepiness. In those ordinary moments, the ice around his heart began to thaw. One afternoon, as he rocked Leo to sleep, the boy gripped his finger, and Damien felt a connection he thought he'd never have again. That night, back in his penthouse, he did something he'd avoided for 5 years. He entered the storage room, a space no one was allowed in, and opened a dusty box labeled Clara. Inside was his lost world, a worn teddy bear, a fairy tale book with his daughter's scribbles. He held the bear, pressed it to his cheek, and for the first time, the memory brought not just searing pain, but a distant sweetness. The next day, playing with Leo, he noticed the boy clutching a new stuffed giraffe. "My daughter had a teddy bear too," Damien said suddenly, his voice low. Its name was Barnaby. She wouldn't go anywhere without it. Maya paused, looking at him. He was sharing a fragment of himself, a gift more precious than the apartment. "She must have loved you so much," she said softly. "She did," Damien replied, and a sad, genuine smile, the first, formed on his lips. "She was my sunshine." Maya's life began to shift too. She no longer lived in survival mode. She slept through the night. Her smiles came more often, more naturally. One day, passing a bookstore, she stopped and bought a nursing textbook, a field she'd once dreamed of pursuing. Her ambitions, buried under life's weight, were stirring back to life. One evening, after Leo was asleep, they sat together on the balcony, gazing at the city's twinkling lights. The silence between them was now comfortable. "When I lost Lillian and Clara," Damien began, his voice nearly a whisper, "I thought that part of me, the part that knew how to care, to love, died with them." Maya turned to him, moonlight glinting in her eyes. She offered no platitudes. She spoke a simple truth, one that had changed them both. "It didn't die," she whispered. "It was just waiting." Life in the cozy apartment settled into a peaceful rhythm. Days were no longer measured by crises but by small, simple milestones. Leo's first laugh as Damien played peekaboo with him. The first meal Maya cooked in a real kitchen. The first evening they watched a movie together. Just friends, sitting a safe distance apart on the sofa, their silence no longer awkward but comfortably warm. Damien was relearning how to be part of a family. Maya was relearning how to trust. Then one afternoon, the past knocked. Not a literal knock, but a white envelope, sender unnamed, slipped under the door. Maya picked it up, and the moment she saw the familiar handwriting, her heart skipped a beat. It was her mother's. Her hands trembled as she opened the letter. Inside were a few short lines, written with a pen pressed hard into the paper. "Maya, my dear, I saw the interview. No words can justify what your father and I did. I was wrong. Every day I live with regret. If there's even the smallest chance for me to meet my grandson, please let me know. I love you. Mom." Maya read and reread the letter, each word carving deeper into her heart. The anger she'd suppressed for 2 years surged, hot and bitter. Anger at abandonment, at cowardice. But beneath it was a deeper pain, a longing for a family once whole. She sat at the kitchen table for hours, the crumpled letter in her hands, her mind a tangle of emotions. When Damien returned, he saw her there and knew something was wrong. She silently handed him the letter. He read it, then set it down gently. He didn't offer advice. He just sat beside her and asked simply, "What are you thinking?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice hoarse. "Part of me wants to tear it up, to scream that it's too late. But what about Leo? Does he deserve to grow up not knowing his roots, no matter how broken they are?" Damien looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. "I can't tell you what to do, Maya. I don't have that right," he said slowly. But I know what it's like to lose family, and I know the regret of words left unsaid, chances missed. Whatever you decide, do it for you and Leo, not for them. 3 days later, they drove out of Chicago. Damien's sleek SUV glided down the highway, leaving skyscrapers behind for the quiet suburbs, where perfect houses sat behind manicured lawns. It was the world Maya once belonged to, and the world that had cast her out. Damien drove, his presence beside her a silent source of strength. Her parents' house looked unchanged, white paint, blue shutters, a porch swing, but to Maya it felt like a stranger's home. She stood before the door for a long moment, clutching Leo tightly. Damien stayed a step behind, giving her space. The door opened slowly. Her mother, Mrs. Reed, appeared. She looked far older than Maya remembered. Lines of grief and regret etched deep around her eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. Mrs. Reed's gaze didn't meet Maya's first. It fixed on the child in her arms. Then her eyes welled with tears. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was so afraid, sweetheart. Afraid of what the neighbors would say. Afraid of shaming the family. And because of that foolish fear, I lost you." Maya stayed silent, her body rigid with defense. But then Leo, in a child's innocence, broke the tension. He grinned and reached a tiny hand toward his grandmother. That simple act was all it took. The ice wall Maya had built around her heart began to crack. Slowly, hesitantly, she stepped forward and placed Leo in her mother's arms. Mrs. Reed held the grandson she'd never met, and she wept. Not loud sobs, but quiet tears of regret and long-suppressed love. She cradled him as if trying to embrace all the lost time. Damien watched from a distance. He saw Maya place a hand on her mother's shoulder. Her father didn't appear. Some wounds needed more time to heal. But today a step was taken. Forgiveness wasn't an event, it was a journey. And on that porch in the afternoon light, the journey had begun. The trip to the suburbs left a subtle but profound change in their apartment. The air felt lighter, as if an invisible burden Maya had carried was finally set down. Forgiveness, though not yet complete, brought peace. And in that peace, a new question arose, not about the past but the future. What do we do next? The question came up one quiet evening after Leo was asleep. Damien, a man wealthy enough to do nothing for 10 lifetimes, felt restless. He'd been saved from emptiness but still lacked purpose. Maya, now secure, yearned to contribute. Her street survival had given her an empathy no classroom could teach. "You have so much," Maya said softly, gazing at the city's lights, "and I have nothing but my story. But I know there are thousands of mothers out there like I was, scared and alone. Especially when winter comes." That's when the idea was born. Not a complex business plan, but a simple notion rooted in her compassion and his resources. What if they could turn the one safe day she'd longed for into hundreds, thousands of safe days for others? What if they could create a refuge, not just a roof, but a place of true healing? Damien looked at her, and for the first time in years, a strategist's fire blazed in his eyes, not for profit, but for a mission. They wouldn't just donate money. They'd build something from scratch. They named it Leo's Light Foundation. Because this child, with his smile and existence, was the beacon that guided them both out of darkness. The following months were a whirlwind of purposeful action. Damien Sterling, the old Wall Street wolf, was back. But instead of corporate takeovers, he met with architects, activists, and city officials. His decisiveness and ruthless negotiation skills were now used to cut red tape, find abandoned buildings to renovate, and secure top resources. Meanwhile, Maya became the project's heart. She wasn't a figurehead. She was hands-on in every step. She interviewed homeless families to understand their real needs. Not cold charity meals, but a small kitchen to cook for their kids. Not just a bed, but skills classes to stand on their own. Not only material aid, but mental health support. Her dream of becoming a nurse evolved into something greater. She was caring for an entire community. They became a team. They worked, argued, planned, and celebrated small victories together. In the process, their friendship and respect blossomed into something deeper, a love built on understanding, shared purpose, and mutual admiration. A year after the idea's inception, the first Leo's Light Foundation facility opened. It wasn't a lavish event, but a warm ceremony in the courtyard of an old brick building transformed into bright, safe apartments. The first residents, young mothers with small children, were there. Maya's mother attended, standing quietly in a corner, her eyes shining with undeniable pride. After brief speeches, Damien led Maya and Leo, now a toddling boy, to a small garden they built behind the building. He turned to her, autumn sunlight catching her hair. A year ago, in a dark, cold parking lot, he began, his voice warm. "You asked me for one day, a safe day for Leo." He knelt on one knee before her and their little boy. "I tried to give you that day, but the truth is, while building a shelter for others, you and Leo built a home for me. You filled my life's silence with laughter. You replaced emptiness with purpose. You gave me a family." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "You've given me all your days, Maya. So I only want to ask, will you give me the rest of your life?" He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears of joy streamed down Maya's face. Unable to speak, she nodded frantically. As Damien slid the ring onto her finger, Leo, in a tiny suit, waddled over and hugged Damien's leg. Looking up with a radiant smile, he said one clear word: "Daddy." Damien scooped Leo up with one arm, the other still around Maya. In that embrace, under golden sunlight, a family, not born of blood, but forged from a plea in the rain, from forgiveness and from a love built on hope, was finally whole. Damien Sterling and Maya Reed's wedding wasn't held in a grand cathedral or a lavish ballroom with thousands of guests. It took place on a sunny June afternoon in the garden of the first Leo's Light Foundation facility. This place, born from pain and nurtured by hope, had become a symbol of their love. The guests weren't finance moguls or social elites. They were those who'd witnessed and become part of their story. Maya's mother, her eyes now sparkling with joy instead of regret. Damien's loyal elderly assistant who'd made that first secret delivery. And a few families, mothers and children, beaming brightly, living proof of the legacy Damien and Maya were building together. Maya walked down a path strewn with wild daisies, hand in hand with Leo. The boy, in a tiny suit, looked solemn carrying a velvet ring box. Damien waited under a simple tree arch, and when he saw her, not in a worn coat but a pristine white dress, his eyes held an ocean of love and gratitude. Their vows weren't flowery words copied from books. They were promises written from their lives. Damien took her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Maya, I once lived in darkness, in a world of loss and regret. I thought that was all I had left. But then you and Leo came. You came with a plea for one safe day, and in the end, you gave me a life full of light. I vow to spend the rest of my days proving worthy of the miracle you brought, to love you and to protect our little family." Maya's turn came, her gaze locked on his, her voice clear and earnest. "Damien, I once thought hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. You showed me kindness exists in the most unexpected places. You gave me a home, my son a future, but most importantly, you showed me the value of my own story. I vow to build a meaningful life with you, to turn pain into hope for others, and to love you with all I have." As they exchanged rings, delivered by a proud little ring bearer, the garden erupted in warm applause. It wasn't just the union of two people, but the merging of two worlds, proof that love can grow from broken pieces. Years passed. Leo's Light Foundation grew beyond a single Chicago site into a nationwide network of hope, with safe homes, scholarships for single mothers, and playgrounds echoing with children's laughter. Damien Sterling's name no longer conjured a ruthless Wall Street wolf, but a champion of compassion and change. Yet their greatest legacy wasn't in buildings or statistics. It was in everyday moments. A Sunday afternoon with Damien, now with a few gray hairs, patiently teaching an older Leo to throw a baseball. Maya, now a nurse and foundation director, sitting on a porch swing, reading a book, occasionally glancing up to smile at her husband and son. Who could have imagined this story began with a whisper in a fancy restaurant? "Sir, could I have your leftovers?" Who could have guessed an untouched steak could spark a journey that transformed countless lives? Damien and Maya's story teaches us something. A person's true legacy isn't measured by their bank balance, but by the hearts they've warmed. It shows that family isn't always born of blood, but of those willing to walk through a storm with you. It's a reminder that, whether you have everything or nothing, we all can receive and give second chances. Their story may have ended, but tales of compassion and hope live on around us in the smallest acts of kindness. If this story touched your heart, made you feel, made you hope, or even brought a tear, Please don't hesitate to hit like and share it to spread this message. Most importantly, subscribe to our channel, where every story reminds us that the greatest, most enduring miracle is human kindness. See you in the next story.